Changing the conversation now to the invitation to the public hearing and call for memoranda of the Nigerian Police Act 2020 will begin by 12 noon on Wednesday, the 18th of March 2020 at the conference hall of the Senate's new building at the National Assembly Complex Abuja.
Well, an effort to provide for a more efficient and effective police service that is based on the principles of accountability and transparency, as well as protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms, brought to the fore a bill for an act to repeal the Police Act Cap P19, Law of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, and enact the Nigeria Police Bill 2019 to provide for the framework for the police service and ensure cooperation and partnership between the police and communities in maintaining peace and combating crime, as well as related matters. And all of that is popularly known as the Police Reform Bill.
The proposed act, presently which enacted by President Muhammadu Buhari, empowers the police force to effectively prevent crimes without threatening the liberty and privacy of persons in Nigeria, strengthen the police force in performance of its functions, including safety and security of all persons, communities, and property of Nigeria. Joining us now from our Abuja studio on Nigeria Police Reform Bill is Okechukwu Nwanguma, is Executive Director, Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, rulaac. It's a pleasure having you, Okechukwu. Okechukwu, long overdue this bill, you'll say. Can you take us through the gamut of what it entails?
Okay, thank you for having me in your studio today. This bill, the rationale behind the bill is the fact that the Nigerian operations of the Nigerian police is still governed by an obsolete law, the Police Act that came into force in 1943. Actually predating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the mission and operations of the Nigerian police under a democracy cannot be the same as they were under military rule, when the police were used as tools of oppression, but what has even made the need for police reform more urgent is the increasing insecurity in Nigeria and the fact that Nigerian police have not been able to meet, have not been able to respond effectively to provide, security and safety for the citizens. So it becomes important that Nigerians support this effort, and that is why civil society, and by the way, I'm consulting for the rule of law and anti-corruption of the British Council and the Nigerian Policing Program to, review this bill from the civil society perspective to ensure that the bill receives, adequate, input to ensure that it reflects the realities. The act as it is no longer fit for purpose, and so we are trying to bring about to democratize the mission and operations of the police to fit into, a modern democratic policing, so that the Nigerian police will be in a position to adequately, and effectively discharge their functions under the law.
Well, there have been various attempts and reforms for the police in Nigeria, but I want to ask you, just how important and how effective would this be for the rank and file of the police? I'm talking about the officers themselves. How much of an impact would this reform bill, if passed into law, translate to better effective police for the men themselves, men and women who wear that uniform?
Well, it's important to point out that the efforts to review the Police Act, which, like I told you, is a colonial act that has not received any comprehensive review since 1943. The efforts to review it started in 2004 with with several different bills that were produced and sent to the Senate, but they never really went far until 2019, when the Senate of the Eighth Assembly passed that bill, but it failed at the House of Representatives. But the current Senate, the current National Assembly, has immediately they came on board. The bill was represented, and we are happy about the speed with which it is going. The Senate has given assurance that they're going to ensure that this bill, passes. But one thing that is important is that over the years there have been a number of presidential committees on police reform that have come up with different recommendations, far-reaching recommendations, including even civil society, panels on police reform that also came up with a report in 2012 and made recommendations. A lot of these recommendations have been reflected in this bill, and this bill has gone through a lot of audit, a lot of public input has gone into it. So, and it contains, while either trying to review certain provisions that are no longer, fit under a democracy. It has also tried to introduce some new provisions. One of which, for example, is the bill attempts to expand the role of the functions and the role of the police to include, beyond just law enforcement duties, also include the provision of service to the people and the respect of human rights, and then partnership with the community. You would notice that a lot of people have been talking about community policing. The bill also has a provision for community policing. And you also know that funding and the budget process have remained major challenges for the police. This bill also makes a provision for a funding. There's a funding provision which is linked to a policing plan, so that funds will now be attached to a policing plan, so that it is possible at the end of every year to review how far the police has achieved the plans, what are the...
Okay, I hate to interrupt your train of thoughts, Mr. Okechukwu, but we need to go on a short break now. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation on the police reform bill. Join us again. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still joined in our Abuja studios by Mr. Okechukwu Nwanguma, the Executive Director, Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, rulaac. And we're still talking about the police reform bill. Now, the federal government initiated a community policing program, and it is yet to take off effectively due to the absence of clarity and a legal framework. Now, we know that this bill has a huge push for community policing to address national security and peace by this mainstream community policing. How would you say that this bill affects that, seeing as the initiative already set in place by the FG is yet to take off?
Well, what the bill attempts to do is to provide a legal, framework for the practice of community policing. Because just like you rightly mentioned, the federal government has been toying with the idea of community policing, without an actual common understanding of what it means and how to make it operational and to adapt it to our local needs. But of course, community policing is basically about police and the community that serve working together to identify priorities and to jointly also identify the solutions to those problems. It is not about the people taking over policing, but so what the bill tries to do is to provide a framework for the takeoff. But of course, it's a discussion that is continuous because there's need for clarity of what it means and how we can adapt it to serve our purpose. But the truth remains that community policing has become the most preferred, philosophy and strategy of policing everywhere in the world, because policing itself is local, and without community partnership, the police cannot effectively discharge their functions.
All right, Okechukwu, real quickly, I just want to talk on the lines of this. when this bill finally becomes operational, will it solve issues like FSARS and SARS? That's another one. And how are you also going to segue this into the recent report, on policing in this country? Because we've had many reports that have been submitted to the president as regards this, but it looks as though those issues are one too many. They keep increasing. What will you say about those 2 points?
Can you say that again? I didn't clearly hear.
Will it address the menace of FSARS?
The FSARS, right?
Federal SARS, yes.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, the bill tries to, incorporate certain provisions in the Constitution and the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, particularly the sections dealing with human rights. And of course, there have been a lot of reforms in the criminal justice system. So the bill tries to bring the police in complementarity with these reforms, because as you know, the police is the face and the entry point into the criminal justice system. And unless the police is fixed, it will be difficult to fix other components of the criminal justice system. So it tries to prioritize respect for human rights, prioritize accountability to ensure that, discipline and professionalism, are strengthened in the police, and that as opposed to, in the past when things happen, abuses are committed and nobody is brought to account. So the bill tries to strengthen both internal and external accountability, and of course also to strengthen the work of the Police Council, which is the constitutional body that makes policy and supervises the police, and including even the procedure for the appointment of the Inspector General of Police, to ensure that the procedure for appointment is transparent, competitive, and merit-driven, because leadership is key in ensuring discipline and professionalism. So the bill has tried to address a lot of these in terms of human rights, partnership with the community, and effectiveness, accountability, transparency, and partnership with the community.
Well, Mr. Nwanguma, you seem optimistic about this bill. But there still needs to be implementation if and when it passes. Do you foresee a seamless transition from this fantastic, optimistic bill to reform the Nigeria police to actions, which is what we actually need? Well,
my optimism, arises from the fact that, like I told you, this is a colonial law, 1943, that has never, benefited from any comprehensive review. So if we're able to get it passed, it means one step forward. And of course, the next step will be to get presidential assent. Part of the work we're doing is also to engage with authorities and individuals at the executive level who are in a position to influence and ensure that the president assents to it. And when that happens, at least we have taken a second step. Then what will be left will be implementation. And of course, the bill will provide a new legal framework, to drive police reform. Of course, we'll start the new advocacy to ensure that the police operates within the framework of the new law, to ensure that human rights abuses are not allowed to happen. Police funding is improved. Motivation, training, and professionalism. So the bill will actually, passing the bill will be a major step forward, because a colonial bill that has never been reviewed, getting it reviewed is a major achievement. So, and because of the efforts and resources put into it, including the commitment I see from the National Assembly, I have no doubt that this bill will pass. And when it does, then we also hope that the president will assent.
Some significant innovations in the reform bill, as you've rightfully mentioned: the strengthening of the police council, community policing, respect for human rights, and of course, like I said, community policing earlier. However, the chairman of the Nigerian Law Reform has come out to say that this law should be double-checked and, in fact, triple-checked. Are there any gray areas that you think this reform bill does not address before it goes for the public hearing tomorrow?
Well, we are not likely to get a perfect, if the bill even passes, it's not likely to be a perfect bill. But of course, there will always be room for further amendment. But we're doing the best we can to ensure that all the gray areas, are addressed. A lot of stakeholders, as we speak now, are meeting with the support, like I said, Nigerian Policing Program and the rule of law and anti-corruption and other groups like even the Nigerian Situation Room, PLAC. Different groups are working to ensure that we take a critical look at the bill so that at least we can get the best. Now, the last time in 2009, when the bill failed to pass at the House of Reps, it was because of certain provisions that the House of Reps disagreed with. So we have also tried to look at those and see what can be done. For instance, there are some provisions that if they pass without a constitutional amendment, for example, let me give you an example, the appointment of the Inspector General of police. The bill also tries to make a provision for that. But if that provision is not consistent with the Constitution, and even if we want to amend the procedure as it is in the Constitution, we also need to take interest in the ongoing efforts to also review the Constitution so that certain provisions that will facilitate the operations of the bill when it becomes law will be, will be met. So we're doing the best we can to ensure that we put in the best that should be in that bill.
Okay, but you see, this bill has been up for contest and debate many times. This was started in 43. If you cast your mind back, the first time this bill was even challenged through an inquiry was what happened in 49, Iva Valley Massacre. And since 1949, we've had constant review of police operations in Nigeria. But it looks as though nothing is being done. Recently, we had the Okechukwu white paper. So we can have bills, but how can you assure me that even when this is passed, the culture of, of pervasive lack of respect for the fundamental human rights of Nigeria will be done away with, and all the provisions in this bill will be upheld?
Yeah, I already mentioned that the mission and operations of the police in a democracy, and by mission, I'm talking about the policing, philosophy. So we need to change that colonial philosophy of violence and brutality and corruption, which is why the preamble to the bill addresses the mission of the police in a democracy, which includes effectiveness, efficiency, transparency, accountability, respect for human rights, and partnership with the community. So the bill takes into cognizance the need to change the culture of policing, which we inherited from colonial rule, to entrench the culture of democratic policing. And so, but just like you said, over the years, there have been a number of committees set up by government to review, to reform the police, to propose, recommendations for police reform. But we find that there seems to be a lack of political will on the part of government. These committees will go around the country, conduct public hearings, receive inputs, rich inputs, and then come up with good reports and recommendations. But the problem is to implement them. But like I said, this bill has tried to capture some of these vital recommendations from the various committees of government and civil society. And that is why when we have this bill passed, it becomes easy to hold the police to account on account of this new law and this new legal framework, this new mission that, and the law that should govern the operations of the police in a democracy. But we have to keep doing the best we can and hoping that the president will assent to the bill, and then will not just rest even when the bill passes and is assented. We'll continue to advocate to ensure that implementation happens, that government holds the police to account on account of this bill.
Well, we'd like to share your optimism, and thank you so much for coming on the morning show today on Arise News, Mr. Nwanguma. We do appreciate your presence. Thank you.